Now, all right, I am recording on the computer. Today took a little bit of time to check in, and I don't like to record those too much, and that's just kind of how I feel. I like to maintain some level of students being able to have some time in the class where they're not being recorded and they don't have to worry about everything getting shot out into the internet, because that's the nature of digital things. Everything gets shot out onto the internet. So for today, we're going to be going through a PowerPoint and we're going to be practicing a lot of generative occult writing. So get your notebooks out, get your word processor open, whatever you need to do. We are going to do 3 key activities and a couple of variations on them. The first, we will be actually using tarot to inspire our writing. Then we're going to do a technique that I've called body writing that I dreamed up once upon a time. Then we'll talk a little bit about revision processes. And then the final activity will be, after I talk about some brain science, will be a spontaneous or generative writing, listening to what I just like to think of as any trippy music. That can be anything that appeals to you. But a lot of people find that music, especially when you clue in to figure out what music works best for you, can be a signal that makes your brain go, oh, it's time to work. So if you're always listening to Jimi Hendrix and writing, you put on Jimi Hendrix and you go, okay, it's time to write. And so much of the writing life and the writing practice is tricking the brain into being in writing mode more often, unless you're one of those people that's always in writing mode, and it must be interesting to be you. So let's get started here. Where is my thingamajigger? It is right here. Okay, can you see my screen? All right, so experiments in esoteric generative writing. So this is a big old weird Dr. Ulrich special. We did this last year and I've done some variations on it. It was pretty successful. So I'd love to get some feedback on how y'all think this goes. All right, so be ready to write. First thing we're doing is tarot. We have 3 cards here. We have the top, and this is from the Thoth deck. Now, the Thoth deck was designed by Aleister Crowley, theoretically, and he wrote a book called The Book of Thoth, describing this almost theoretical deck of tarot cards. Now, he went to a woman named Lady Frida Harris, and he and her worked, and she painted what he had described, but not exactly. Like, she would take her own spin on it, and then he would correct her or advise her, and sometimes she would actually get him to make big changes in the symbolism of the cards and the imagery. So in many ways, I think it's not quite fair to call it the Crowley deck. I call it the Crowley Harris deck. And I'm pretty comfortable just calling it the Lady Harris deck when I'm feeling saucy. So these are 3 cards from the Greater Arcana. So these are the trump cards. They are 22 numbered images that reflect the soul transforming from a state of being a fool, which is 0, and the fool is complete openness to all potentiality with no realization of what's a coming, which does sort of feel like the core way that we begin in the world, all the way to 21. That's the final one, the universe, in which the soul has become perfected and is aligned with all other aspects of the universe. And if you dig into the imagery there, you'll see the 4 angels. You can see it. There's actually a bunch of scientific bazillion like little details way in the background there. There's a periodic table and a number of notions of magic, alignment, movement. But these are evocative. These are really evocative images. So, and they're some of my favorites. So yes, H.
Are we looking at the main thing here? It says 3 experiments in esoteric generative writing, or is there a different slide?
What are you seeing on your screen?
I don't know if you all are seeing it, but I'm seeing 3 experiments, esoteric generative writing. Like maybe it's the title slide?
Yeah, me too.
You don't see 3 tarot cards.
No.
Okay, well then it's not sharing right. You see three tarot?
Okay, now we do. Yep.
There we go. Yeah. All right. So what I had said about the images would probably make more sense if you could see them. Okay. What we're looking at is these three images. They are the states of the soul in three various states. So the universe is like complete fulfillment, realization of the will in the world. Of course, one must remember that after 21 always comes the eventual 0 back to the fool. The 5 is kind of right in the center. That's the Hierophant. You can also see the 4 angels, which is why I chose to put these together, and a number of other images within here that I could talk about kind of endlessly. Now, all the way over here, we have the tower, or the blasted tower, the fall of the Tower of Babel. You can see that there's this curlingness. There are entities that are falling off the top. There's the ray of light of the sun that you may see overlapping in other places. But there's a notion of the world has gone wrong and fallen apart. I always see this as a very exciting point where the destruction of, say, death, which I believe is 15, has become so wrought that everything comes apart as it's beginning to be reborn. Because as you see, the top of the tower that I see becomes this snake bellowing fire, is bringing forth a circular energy. So how are we going to do this? What I want you to do is we're going to write for 5 minutes. Pick one of these cards. And I want you to start writing. And this is generative writing. It can be about anything, or it can be about your work, or just anything that comes into your head. I just want you to pick an image, take a look at it, and as you're writing, keep looking back at that image. So let's go 5 minutes.
Hmm.
Got about a minute left. Okay, draw your sentence to a close. Shut up. Stop it. Hate that sound. All right. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a minute and read through what you're writing. Okay, read through something you got. I want you to select a sentence or a section or a chunk of sentences or something you find useful in some way or another. And I'd like you to just really like take a minute or two and rewrite that. Find the sentence you like or the idea you like or something and rewrite it as a solid sentence. You got it, or you need a little bit more time? Okay. Un poquito. Dits. That's Tibetan. A little. Dits. Dits. Trouble Mindu. Okay. Who picked the tower? Did anybody pick the tower? No tower people. Who? Oh, Brooke did. Excellent. All right. This is another little twist I wanted to do on this trick. And I don't know if it'll work. We'll see that. All right, Brooke, this is important for you. Here is the card being revealed on a different tarot deck. This is the Golden Dawn Tarot that supposedly was a secret one until it was published in the 1970s. And this one was supposed to be the one that, in fact, Crowley was drawing from because he was a Golden Dawn initiate. So just kind of like look at that image for a second. Kind of, you can think about the other one in the back of your head, but kind of keep that one in your head, all right?
Mhm.
Now here's another one. This is a recently published one, also from the Golden Dawn. And just kind of look at, I love that it's in the black and white. This is called the Hermetic Tarot. It's really lovely. I'm realizing a better way to do this is to have actual slides with the cards on them. But hey, we're playing by ear here. Always take chances when teaching. Did anyone choose the Hierophant? Nobody chose the Hierophant. So we went with the
The one
universe.
with the man
Yeah, the one with the man.
is me.
All right, cool. All right, so check out our little Hierophant here. The Golden Dawn one. Notice the pretty colors. I think the writing, the drawing is a little bit more simplistic, but every little image there was inspired by sort of the same base that the Thoth card would have come out of. And then look at this guy. Again, these are really similar images, but they take different twists, and I feel have a whole bunch of different variable meanings, and they trigger sort of things in your head. All right, finally, H, you did the universe. So in the universe, we have that one. Also notice no girl butt. That girl butt is why the Thoth Tarot is actually illegal in the American prison system, which really pisses me off because it's considered pornographic. But yeah, if you look there, you can see similar shapes. You can see the sort of like four entities around. You can see the Alhambra, the what do they call it? It's the shape of an almond. That's a very important Italian Renaissance thing. And they put the zodiac on there. All right. And then here is the Hermetic one. That one looks really different to me. All right. Now, you weren't supposed to do anything particular with those images. I just wanted you to have them in your head. Now I want you to take 5 minutes, look at that sentence that you had, and I want you to expand upon it. And if possible, flip some of those images back through your head and see if they are inspiring. I'll go back to your original image in just a second. Now, you can either write straight prose, or you can follow the suggestion of Robert Boyce and use clustering. Namely, just get ideas, and I do this all the time. I just get ideas and words and key ideas on the phrase and start writing lines. And sometimes stuff pops up that way that I'm surprised by. All right, so there's back to your original cards. See if there are any flashing images that pop into your head that nuance those, but have at it once more. 5 minutes. All right, start drawing it to a close. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to another project, but if things work out, we're going to come back and there's another thing I want to do with tarot, looking at these three cards. But I think it'll be kind of interesting to split them up. So we're going to do this activity and then we're going to take a little bit of a break. All right, I developed this writing program or this writing protocol when I was developing curriculum for a high school, and when I was being trained to be a teacher, and I got really interested in it, and I came back to it after 25 years to use it with my Naropa students because I think it works really well in the Naropa context, in the contemplative studies context, and to some degree in the yoga studies context. This is what I call body writing. So at this point, I need you to just kind of get yourself wherever you need to be. Do you need a yoga up? You can take a minute and yoga up. Do your yoga thing. This is how I yoga. I don't know how you yoga. It's how I yoga. I feel yogified. I was told that there was a somewhat prominent up-and-coming scholar at University of Virginia who was studying Hinduism, and he in fact had a jam band in the area called Yogatron. I'm still upset about this. Okay, so for this project, you are going to be writing once again, but your triggers are not going to be an external thing, are not going to be those images that I showed you before. So body writing is very similar to sort of the Gurdjieff sort of notion of the body scan. So sort of take some deep breaths. You can close your eyes if you want, be wherever you're at. Take some deep breaths, ground yourself, whatever that means for you. I will not do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram in front of you. That's what I would need to do. Ground yourself and get that artificial sense of being opening that you're forced to do when a yoga teacher tells you to. But I don't wanna. Well, you're gonna. You don't wanna. All right. Now, I want you to do a body scan. Start from the bottom to the top, so your toes to your head, or you can start with your fingertips, going to your elbows, going to your knees, or maybe your outer sheath, of which there are many selves, to get to your inner sheath. Follow through from the big to the little, from the top to the bottom, in any direction you want to go, but put awareness in your physical or astral spectral body and move from the bottom to the top, the outside to the in. So most outside, and we're going to do 10 to 1. For starting at the most outside, I'm going to count back to 1. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, locate a space anywhere in there, anywhere around throughout the body. Breathe into that space, connect your mind to that space, and just hold that space. Hold the awareness of that space. Anything that comes up is fine. You're not doing dharana. You're just hold your attention to the space and observe what comes up. I'm going to do that for a minute. All right, now, holding your attention to that space, not forcing anything, just the only thing you're controlling is your attention. And you're keeping it on that space. I'd like you to begin to write. I want you to type, I want you to scribble, however you want. As you're writing, just keep bringing your attention back to that space, or writing about something completely different that's not coming out of there, but with an awareness. You're just kind of keeping that awareness of that space in your subtle body or actual body or physical body. And as you write, let the writing guide you. The big brain is working here. Let the writing go wherever it needs to go, but kind of actively return your awareness to that space. That awareness needs not to change what you're writing, but just as you're writing, just keep returning to that space. If it helps, and this project sometimes it does, visualize the connection of that space in you or on you or through you and your little paws as they're doing their things. You can make it a rainbow. You can make it a ray of light. I don't care what it is. You could make it a creeping tendril. You could make it a big string of poop. I don't care. But visualize some connection there, if that's helpful to you. All right, we're going to take 10 minutes. Go. Remember, you're just turning your mind and awareness back to it. That's not necessarily shaping your writing. You're perpetually keeping that awareness in your brain. You have 4 minutes to go. About 2 minutes. Okay, draw what you're writing to a close. Reread over what you wrote and select one sentence to share. I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute to find that. Okay. Truly voluntary. Would anyone like to share their one sentence?
I'm happy to.
Please, H.
Where is it? The clouds she caresses, holds them gently in the palm of her hand. The moisture, she licks it up with her tongue.
Nice. Anybody else? I like that there's some bleed over probably between your tarot and your body writing. I wonder why that is. Okay. Like I said, select a passage or a set of sentences. If there was time, I'd have you revise them a minute. But what I want you to do is just kind of think about. No, it doesn't work as well as I wanted it to. All right, this is what I want you to do in your own head, real quick. I want you to look at what you wrote in this and turn it into a story. So, and then I'm going to ask you to do something else. So what I want you to do is just take like 2 minutes, look what you got and turn it into a story with the characters, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Just kind of get that in your head. Tell the story based on that one sentence. H's will be easier because there are concrete details. Nothing's easy. Okay. Here is not homework, but there's a task I want you to do. I want you to think of this process, think of the cards, think of the body writing, think about the way you just shifted what you wrote into a narrative. How could you apply those to your generative writing on your topic? So in particular, how can you use some of those techniques? And I'm going to tell you why I think they're effective after a break. How do you think you could use those techniques in your actual writing practice? We're going to do generative writing or even when you're stuck. And this is something you should be regularly doing, like once a week. Rethink about your thesis, even your project, and think about how to tell it as a story. And that'll help you find the story because every academic essay has a story in it somewhere. And once you can tell the story, which is the same process as taking that one sentence and turning it into a story, once you can tell it like a story, or even tell it like a short joke, like about a pig with a wooden leg. If you can tell the story of your research like you would like a short joke, then you're on your way to kind of bringing a sort of vitality to your writing you'll find surprising. And by telling it like a story, you'll also get out of certain I don't know, certain vagaries that plot us all when we spend too much time setting stuff up and not enough time telling the joke. Okay, so let's just take a quick break and then we're going to come back and we have a few other activities to do and we're going to move on. Okay, I will give you 5.
All right, everybody, come on back. Okay, so I asked you to read from Sword and from Elbow. These are, I think, really useful, important theoretical writings. Well, they're not theoretical, they're methodological. I mean, Elbow's method is you write as process, but the real work of shaping your writing happens in revision, and it gives you various strategies for revising. But one of the key things to remember when revising is to not try to get everything perfect. Let it still be in process. And let it still have errors. Let it still have vague spots. I mean, you don't need to have it be perfect until the end. The time you spend shaping the overall structure without getting like the hard nitty gritty revision, sort of the better the flow will be eventually. Sword tells you that the key to writing catchy academic prose, and I think this is correct, is concrete languages. So very specific nouns. Always name processes. If you say this does this, say this dog does this, not just this does this. Try to get away from abstract phrases, like try to not write about the quintessence of the argument is, or even say the essence of the argument is. You just make the argument. So that's one of the key goals in writing with concrete language. And if you want to see how somebody does it beautifully, look at the writing style of Peter Elbow.
There ain't a single highfalutin word in there. Sword every now and then will throw in something fun and show off, but usually she'll couch everything she shows off with some nice alliteration or some good examples or something that cues you into being on the joke. I feel like Sword is somebody like you're having a cocktail with, like at night. But Elbow is like, he's like this gentle writing teacher next to you. He's like, you got this. You got this. So that's different. Sword is gonna, throw some shade. She's gonna talk some shit. Elbow's gonna be like, no, we're just gonna focus on you and getting you to write nicely and clearly and understandably. Sword's gonna be like, and not sound like a buffoon. So I like to think that she's a little snarkier. She makes a really great point about catchy titles, but I don't want you thinking about titles right now. And I want you to have her ideas about catchy language and catchy titles in your head, but that's titles. We're not at titles yet. You should be writing down in your little journals any title that comes to your head that sounds good. You definitely keep notes of various new ideas for titles, but don't worry about your titles right now. She also has a really great line about hooks and sinkers. So when you're writing, you want to hook the reader in, and she gives various strategies for doing those. Okay, so that's just a vague overview of the reading assignment for the day. Now, you're not going to have a reading assignment for next week because I want you to be getting more polished writing for peer editing. But I want you to think about the ways that Sword and Elbow talk about writing, generating writing, revising writing. I like to think of Sword as giving you permission to be more creative, but remember, she's also saying be creative within the conventions of the work. This is again my caveat at Naropa. Usually my students are already creative. If I'm working in like when I used to teach sort of courses on like writing for engineers, it was really hard to get them to be creative. So you got to find kind of a middle way. Okay. What does all this have to do with brain science? This is something I've been thinking about quite a bit lately due to some research that's come out and due to my own experiences of being ADHD. I had the book handy just a second ago. Anyway, it's around here somewhere. So what I want you to look here is see these brains. And what I'm going to talk about is the default mode network, or DMN, versus the task positive network, or TPN. This research is not that old, and I think it is a game changer for the treatment of ADHD, but also the virtual ADHD that we all have by nature of our modern life and screens and whatnot. So I've given you this terminology, which I have to write down because I can never remember what the names are, but I get the ideas really clearly. Think of your brain. Think of your brain. Your default mode network is where your brain just sits. It's where you daydream. It's just your brain's not doing a specific task. You're shutting down, you're watching TV, you're actively watching squirrels outside, just your brain when it's not doing anything. That's called the default mode network, and it is task negative. You can see from the brain scans over here that they take up a big part of the brain, but a different part of the brain from the task positive network. The task positive network is sort of like it's connected to executive function, by which I mean executive function. That's straight up ahankara. That's your ego saying, we're going to do this and we're going to do it right now, and I'm going to oversee it. So task positive network, that's your brain's doing something specific. Look at how it's all jumbled all over, but really refined. Now, for the average human being that is neurotypical, the average human being isn't neurotypical, but for the neurotypical person, your task positive network is easily activated. You just go, oh, it's time to go write that paper. And then they go and do it. Or, oh, it's time to wash the dishes. And then they go and do it. So it's like their brain can say, oh, I have a thing to do. I'm going to go and do it. And it shifts from the task negative, this default mode network, easily into task positive. It goes from I'm watching TV to I'm folding the laundry. And the neurotypical person can make that change pretty effectively. It's like they have little levers and they can go chunka chunka. Now I'm writing this paper, chunka chunka. Now I'm doing laundry, chunka chunka. Now I'm daydreaming about squirrels, chunka chunka. Now I'm reading a novel, chunka chunka. Now I'm watching TV, chunka chunka. Now I'm washing the dishes, chunka chunka. Back to working on the paper. So what happens with the ADHD person is they don't have those levers. It's like the task negative and the task positive network have a difficulty getting taken apart. So for the ADHD person, and this is truly how it works for me, I will be in my default mode network, and it's just there, and that is staring at the ceiling, watching television, ruminating. Oh my, can I ruminate? Going through that terrible thing somebody said to me, but just really getting my brain, not even really like wandering, but like just like shifting from thing to thing to thing. This is why I can watch 10 hours of horror movies and be like, yeah, all right, I'm in it. Because that's like my default mode network is like really good at like receiving, processing information, but it's passive. It's not doing an active thing. So then when it's time to sit down and write a paper or fold the laundry or whatnot, I go chunka chunka and I go, wait, there's no friggin' levers here. And I can't get into that task positive network positively or just easily. When I get into it, that's, like the hyper focus part of ADHD. I can go hours writing or translating Sanskrit or whatnot, but it's so hard to get from just this ruminating place to actively doing things. And I think about it, I've had periods of my life where I've been really unproductive. And I tried to just be like, I gotta get to work. That didn't work. Self-flagellation. I hate it. I'm still not getting work. I guess I'll just drink myself stupid until inspiration comes. That doesn't work. But it's because that default default mode network, that non-task positive brain just it like gets a hold of me. And that's why when you see somebody who's struggling with this, you want to think that they're lazy. It's amazing how much effort is going into getting into that task positive place and how much energy is being taken up by being stuck in that default mode. Just, it's like there's two different ways of being, and that person is fighting so hard to shift from those. And it's the same thing why when you're around ADHD people that can't relax because they're focused on something task positive on a task, they know that the minute that they just kind of relax back in that default mode network, it ain't coming back. So like, for instance, when I was moving recently and my mother would not leave me alone, she would run into every room and be like, do you need to take this? Do you need to take this? And I'm like, I have money. I'm going to afford it. Stop trying to give me stuff all the time. But I've realized she's ADHD. So she knows that if she doesn't do that thing immediately, or take that idea, like I need this specific half-used cleaning product that she's had for 15 years and give it to me immediately, then she'll get into the default mode and it just won't happen. So ADHD people have all of these triggers and systems and accommodations, really. And the best way to accommodate this in an ADHD person is to get activity. So in the late 90s, we have this description. The task positive network shows consistent activations across different tasks. It's different parts of your brain moving around. The default mode network shows constant deactivations. It's shutting other things down and staying here. That's why the ADHD person wants to watch every show, grasping at any dopamine they can get, because in that DMN, in this default mode network, you're really dopamine deficient. When you're task active in your task active network, you're getting the dopamine of getting little things done. That's why for me, what's really good to do is I have a list and I go, oh, all right, I need to get some wins for the day. So sometimes I'll set up my list and I'll have my big stuff I need to do, but I'll be like, all right, I need momentum. So I'm going to grade 2 sections from my other class. Boom, I'm in my task network. My activated brain is doing stuff. Now I'm going to move to writing. Now I'm going to move to this. But then if I get away from that task positive network and slip into the DMN, it's really hard to get back out. One ADHD friend of mine says he can get out if he can get out the door and be like, and not think, but just like get up, get dressed, get clothes, and keep moving, he's good. And he's going to have a good day. But he said that if he stops and sits down in the middle of any of that morning routine, there's a chance nothing could happen the whole day. So that's really astute to know that. So we're talking about activation and deactivation. Both modes are useful. For the neurotypical person and for the ADHD person, the default mode network is where a lot of our inspirations come from. That's where like the crazy thoughts come from. That's where we're connecting memories. There's tons of stuff going on there. It's also the spot where you're relieved from that task positivity that's exhausting if you're doing it all the time. Unfortunately, for an ADHD person, they're there like kind of trying to rest in the default mode network and that just kind of hang out there. It's not recharging because the task thing keeps jumping in all the time, never really catching all the way, and just making your brain all glitchy because those two aspects don't divide. So when you're stuck in the default mode network, and this is good advice for everyone, there are a couple of tricks. The first thing you have to do is be aware of rumination. If you find that your brain is going through all of these old situations or too many things or just mulling over anything without having any call to action in any way and making you move, you're probably ruminating. That's a good place to be existentially. It's not good for getting shit done. So the default mode network can get paralyzed. It can become paralytic. And it's happened to me a lot. It's especially hard for me when I travel because none of my accommodations and routines are there. So while some people travel and like, I'm going to get so much done on my task today, I'm like, oh, crap, I think I want to stay in the hotel room and just watch TV. I could do that. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's none of my usual stimulators. So how do you get out of this stuck moment? The biggest thing is your environment. You have to just realize, not just if you're ADHD, but if you're anyone, that you can purposely and consciously stimulate that task positive network. Go to a coffee shop if that works for you. Go to the library, go to a different room, set up an environment where you can write, or set up a laundry room where you do laundry. Maybe don't do laundry in the area that you write. Create an environment that gets that task positive network going. You can utilize external triggers. Okay, I can't write. All right, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. Boom, there's an external trigger. Or how about this one? You're like, I have these 5 things to get done today. I'm going to put them in a list and I'm going to cross them off. And the act of crossing off the last one activates the next one. Any type of external trigger. I don't recommend having your partner remind you that you need something to do. That's a bad one. But if you have a friend, you can have like writing accountability where you're both like, all right, we're going to check in every 3 days. And did you get your writing done? Didn't you get your writing done? And then you have an external trigger of you don't want to let your friend down. And if you're really smart, you can do this thing where like, ooh, I'm so excited I get to watch this TV thing tonight. However, if I don't get my writing done, I'm going to feel bad about myself. And just say, I'm going to feel bad about myself. So what writing do I have to get done so I can watch that TV tonight? Boom. Suddenly, instead of a negative motivation, you're like, oh, I'm writing for 20 minutes so that I can go watch 3 hours of Netflix. I don't know. External triggers. There are executive function hacks. Now, your executive functioning brain is the one that makes decisions and puts stuff into place. So anytime you activate your brain and start stimulating that frontal part of the brain, the executive function hack, which is exactly where ADHD people suck. If you take a neurotypical person and you put a red dot against the wall and you set their brain up and say, stare at that red dot, the brain shows them like that their brain's just going, all right, I'm staring at a dot. It's just like constant brain activity, staring at the dot. The ADHD person will be like, fuck you, I'm not looking at that dot. And their brain is all over the place. And this is also modeled in blood flow. In fact, when an ADHD person is given a task, we can actually see a different amount of blood flow than the neurotypical person. And what happens with the drugs, in fact, are they stimulate dopamine going into that front executive function in a way that wasn't happening. And that's why you need amphetamines effectively with ADHD to get the stimulation. So I don't know if you've ever felt really depressed and made a fight with somebody for no damn reason, but stuck to your guns on it. I know I have. A lot of that is not being inherently avoidant, but when you're getting that argument with that person, it might not feel good, but you're getting dopamine from it because you're shifting your brain into an active space instead of like a ruminating space. So executive function hacks. This is one of my favorite ones. Count the squares. Do it right now. Count the squares count the squares you see. Doesn't matter if you've done it before. Count your squares. So there, your brain's coming forward, you're doing something active, and sometimes that's enough to get you to shift into the task positive networking to write. So that's a real quick one. What are other ones? Breathing, exercise. There is research that says that for a lot of ADHD people and a lot of people in general, 20 minutes of daily exercise is nearly as effective as a mild prescription intervention. That's pretty amazing. So how do you activate that task positive network, which is the thing that gets you into writing, the thing that gets you to the table and gets you blah, 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 blah? You need to do actions in your environment, making a place to write where you write when you're there, and activating your brain so you're not waiting for inspiration to come from the default mode network, which might happen if you're neurotypical, but if you're ADHD, will just leave you Googling shoes for sheep for hours. So actions, doing active things. And really when you're stuck ruminating or you're stuck in this kind of like existential space instead of a getting shit done space, it's so frustrating, but the way out of it is to go get shit done. Some people are better at it than others. For me, it depends on the week. And this is good advice for everybody, whether you're neurotypical or neuroatypical, and it's helpful for understanding the neurotypical people in your life and loving them just as they are. Okay, so that was my little thing on brain science. We are to our last activity today. And what it's really about for me on this is another trigger. I've given you the triggers of the tarot cards. I gave you the triggers of the two different tarot cards interpretations. And that trick there, to let you know what I was doing, is I wanted you to create something out of the one tarot cards and then see a different version of them and then see if that triggered anything else as you rewrote it. It's just keeping stimulation. Then with the body writing, again, that's almost like you're hacking the Detroit mode network, but Detroit mode network, nice. But also what you're doing every time you bring your thoughts back to that spot in your body, if it's right there, it's right there. What else are you doing? You're using your active positive network and doing something there, and you're using it while you're doing another thing. So you're keeping your brain stimulated, and the more you keep the brain stimulated, the more you keep from slipping out of the task positive network. So music has been something that's always been helpful for me. And for this, we're going to use an older album at this point called Lift Your Skinny Fists Like Antennas to Heaven by Godspeed You Black Emperor. Has anybody heard of this band before? Surrealist, anarchist, for the most part, instrumental. I've always loved this album. I put together a music list of about like 10 different albums that are out there that work for me. You need to find what works for you. So we're going to do a trick of I'm going to post some sort of surrealist music I like, and I want you to focus on the music and write to it. And I know that this is a core experience for me because I was writing one day when this album came out, and a friend came in and had me put this CD into my little Discman player, and I listened to this very set of music, and something cracked, and I got a really good idea. So I've always You know, and then there's more association. I listen to this music, I get good ideas because I used to have good ideas when I listen to music, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to start this. Let's see if it'll work this way. Is it going to? Is it going to? Oh, it is going to. Okay. So 10 minutes. Just keep turning your mind back to the music, but writing on your own. Big brain's working. We're just using that little bit of turning to the music to keep things active. All right, 10 minutes, go.
We can't really hear the music, or at least I can't.
I was gonna unmute too.
Can you hear it at all now?
Only when you talk, but I wonder if you reshare your screen
Ooh, that
and
might-
do the like share audio, whatever advanced settings
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
That
Or
might help because I think it's just coming through your mic right now.
yeah, I think you're right. Give me a second. Give me a second. All right, you said I go share screen. Where is it? Share audio. Sorry,
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Typically
how-
there's like an advanced settings option.
Advanced sharing options. Okay.
Does it say at the bottom maybe?
Does it says it's allowing who can share, but it's not giving me an audio share.
Maybe it just has it on the main options. I know there's a way that you can share your screen and your audio at the same time.
I'm almost positive you're right. Give me a second here. Let me see if I go. It'll work better this way. Can you hear it any better? It's quiet starting out. Is that any better?
Mm,
I still can't hear anything, I don't think.
Let me make sure something. Can you hear it there?
It sounds fuzzy. It sounds like it might still be coming out of your
Yeah, I think you're right.
audio.
I hate myself right now. All right, this is what I'm gonna do. I will copy this and I'm going to put it in the chat. You just start it out on your own and we'll have 10 minutes all working on it ourselves. Turn off your audio share though. That work? Okay. Okay, draw what you're writing to a close. And I'm going to kind of finish our lecture here because we're right at time. So ideally, we would have a chance to share some of our work and whatnot, but I want you to think about a couple of things. When we were reading in Boyce, he was talking about getting writers working when they're blocked. And he talked about automatic writing and generative writing and spontaneous writing. What we're really working on here by stimulating these different exercises is to move from sort of active conscious writing, from conscious like brain ego writing to not conscious writing. You want to tap into your unconscious that's always happening. It's like when you have a really good idea while you're driving, because your unconscious, which is in that default mode network, bubbles up when you're not thinking of it. So just as you're writing, sometimes spontaneous ideas bubble up, and it's important to keep track of those as they come. When you're writing, try to not narratize what you're writing. Pay attention and don't pay attention to the world around you. What do I mean by this? Don't multitask. Have just your word processor open and don't be thinking in your head, oh, I can't write today. Oh, I'm writing really well today. Oh, I would be writing better today if I read that. Oh, I need to stop doing this and reading this. Shut up, just write and focus on the writing task. Don't blame yourself, don't worry, and don't criticize because you're not making these narrations. You're not making judgments about your performance. When you're writing generative and automatically and whatnot, you're getting it out without using that inner critic. And that inner critic will, while trying to be very helpful, really kind of blows and does not help all that much. You really want to lose a sense of time. And part of losing that sense of time is if you stop narrativizing, if you stop having a half thought of, I'm writing right now. I'm writing right now. I don't want to check social media. I don't want to check my email. If you can just write and write without thinking about other things, you'll get into that sense of flow where time slows or dilates. So as Calvin says to Hobbes, I don't know where it comes from. It just flows out of the pen. That's what we're aiming for. That's the thinking part of writing. That's the getting a good first draft done. You get it all out, you'll make it nice later. So we're trying to be less conscious of our writing and more into the writing process. Because when you're conscious of the writing process, like really actively and narrativizing it, you'll be self-conscious. And when you're self-conscious, you will judge yourself and slow everything down. So instead of narrativizing, spending time writing or spending time focusing on the abstract account of the writing process, or focusing on your past experiences or bad experiences and worrying, you are going to instead just take all that and write and see and just let it go. So conscious writing assigns blame and it affects it assigns cause and effect when it tells stories. So if you're not writing well, oh, it's because I didn't read well. I should have done that, blah, 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 blah. It blames, it criticizes, it exaggerates, and it doesn't help get more words on the page. It also will be stuck in a sense of time. So as you're writing, if you're constantly thinking about the deadline, sometimes that's really good because it gives you a dopamine hit and a rush that makes you work. But other times, it's thinking so much about the overt process that you don't attend to what you're doing. Or, as we see from this character from a TV show I don't care for, not sure if I've conquered writer's block or if I'm writing nonsense. Sometimes writing nonsense is conquering writer's block. So why are we doing all of this? Results first. You're going to get much more out of just writing and writing and writing than thinking and reading. Though you will get quite a bit out of taking notes when reading and writing as you go. It prevents you getting stuck. I've given you a number of triggers that you can use or that will inspire you to go to when you just can't get yourself in that writing place. Because the most stupid thing of the whole thing is when you can't get yourself into the writing place, what do you need to do? Get into the writing place. It's a terrible tautology. But if you start manipulating your executive functions in your head, counting squares, changing your environment, going to the library, and then giving external sort of triggers. I've got a timer. I'm only going to write for 20 minutes. You know, the classic is the Pomodoro styles. That is, you write for 25 minutes and then you have 5 to 10 minutes of pure non-writing. So and then you go out and you time them every time. So 25 minutes writing, 5 minutes stupid shopping on the internet. 25 minutes writing, 5 minutes stupid watching, I don't know, give yourself 10 minutes so you can watch 1/3 of a sitcom. So shifting, but using those timers, don't trust yourself to naturally go back and forth, but the timers will get you there. Let the big mind do the writing. Move from being conscious and dictating and narrativizing everything you're doing to just getting out of the way and letting the unconscious mind do the task. But you have to get it into the task space so it can come through. Forward motion prevents inertia. If you keep hitting goals, you're going to hit more goals. So sometimes the best thing you can do when you're stuck or just not there or not writing well is, again, just getting some little wins, because the more little wins you have, further you're going to get along. I want you to prevent negative self-talk, imposter syndrome, and procrastination. As J.D. Wilkes from the legendary Shack Shaker says, feed that ego and destroy your soul. So when you hear, I'm not a good writer, the answer is, fuck off, I'm writing. If you hear, I'm not meant to be here, I don't deserve to be here, again, fuck off, I'm writing. When you get procrastination, as I struggle with, I need to use some of these default neural networks to active tasks. But the old adage that Robert Boyce was the first to set out is, the cure for procrastination is action. Because when you procrastinate, you're just heaping coals upon yourself. So be active, ignore the voice in your head, and engage the history of techniques. I mean, in the last 2 lectures, I've modeled some techniques that I've used effectively, but I talked about this whole history that even goes back to the automatic writers in of the spiritualists, or arguably even goes back to the rishis who tuned in to the sound of the Vedas that are all around us and are unauthored, apaurushaya, but they wrote it down. So what kind of magic spell to use? Whichever one works, but work it. That makes sense. All right, I am going to stop here. If anybody has any questions for me after class, I will hang around for a minute. All right, it's been good, y'all. See you later. Maybe that stops.